Well, hi everyone, and a very warm welcome to you today to the Mirvac offices for the 2022 Energy Efficiency Summit, and thank you for braving the weather to be here, and thank you to everyone online. I understand there's almost 500 people joining us online. I'm Chris Akayan, Head of Culture and Capability at Mirvac, a portfolio that encompasses sustainability, health and safety, innovation and people. And I'd like to acknowledge that we are gathered here on Gadigal country in the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to elders past and present. And as we have a number of people joining us online from around the country, I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which we are all on today, and pay my respects to elders past and present. Mirvac's very proud to host today's summit. At Mirvac, we've placed a long-standing priority on energy efficiency. Through the commitment of our sustainability team and our broader business, we have pursued higher and higher standards of efficiency, and we're proud to say that 18 of our assets, including this one, are now rated at least 5-star NABERS energy or above. And this was a big part of our recent achievement to be net positive in Scope 1 and 2 emissions, 9 years ahead of our target date. I'd like to welcome our special guests and keynote speakers today. Senator Jenny McAllister, Assistant Minister for Climate Change and Energy, and California Energy Commission's Andrew McAllister, who's here, a global leader in clean energy policy development. Welcome to both of you. And to our CEO panellists, Ken Morrison from the Property Council of Australia, Ines Willicks, Australian Industry Group, Cassandra Goldie, Australian Council of Social Service, and Luke Menzel from the Energy Efficiency Council. We welcome the renewed focus of this government to respond and take action to shape a cleaner and brighter future. And I think we all acknowledge the shared responsibility of industry, government and the community, and look forward to working collaboratively in the future to support Australia's transition to a net zero economy. Before I hand over to Luke, who will be your MC for today, let me quickly cover off some housekeeping. The bathrooms are the first corridor to the right, so as you leave the room here and to the right, the bathrooms can be found down there. And in the unlikely, and hopefully it never happens with this rain, event that we might need to evacuate, you'll hear the normal standard tones, and our fire wardens will come into the room and escort you to the fire stairs, and they are located, one is located at the end of the corridor where the bathrooms are, and the other one to the right of the lifts that you entered the building in. So that's the fire stairs, but someone will come in and support you through that. So welcome again, and I'll now pass to Luke. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Chris. Thanks for having us over at your place. It is a pleasant change from the little webinar bunker I've built at my home back in Melbourne. I'd also like to acknowledge that we're on the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and welcome the Aboriginal people in the room with us today. Assistant Minister Jenny McAllister, welcome. Commissioner McAllister, welcome. I will say that there's been a bit of confusion around the dueling McAllisters in the Energy Efficiency Council's offices as we've been preparing this event. So I hope you're not offended, Minister, that the nomenclature we've adopted is JMAC and AMAC. So if you hear that in the background, it's not a sign of disrespect. It's all about logistics. So I stand here representing not just the EEC, but 4 organisations: the Australian Industry Group, the Property Council of Australia, and the Australian Council of Social Services. And as Chris said, you'll be hearing from all the CEOs today. But there are 4 convening organisations for this summit, 4 organisations that have come together to put a flag in the sand, because we're of the view that it's past time that we put energy efficiency at the heart of this energy transition that we're all working our way through. And it's crucial that we do so at no time more so than in 2022. We need to cut household energy bills, right? This is the one resource that we have available to us to put downward pressure on energy bills over the next several years. We need to slash our emissions this decade. Energy efficiency can deliver cost-effective abatement over the next 10 years as we continue to decarbonise our energy system. And of course, as so many of you in this room know, and those of you that are playing along at home, by pairing energy efficiency with electrification, we can bring the demand side to the table, make sure that end use is paired with a renewable energy system as we move to 100% renewables. There's an incredible opportunity. So convening organisations, 4 of those, but it isn't just us. There are another 26 organisations that have come to the table, an incredible group of supporting partners. And I'm going to read them out because I'm very excited by this list. The Australian Conservation Foundation, the Australian Sustainable Built Environment Council, the Australian Alliance for Energy Productivity, the Australian Passive House Association, the Australian Power Institute, the Building Designers Association of Australia, Beyond Zero Emissions, the Clean Energy Council, ClimateWorks Australia, Climate Kick Australia, the Electric Vehicle Council, I'm halfway through, Energy Consumers Australia, the Energy Users Association of Australia, the Facility Management Association, the German-Australian Chamber of Industry and Commerce, the Green Building Council of Australia, the National Farmers Federation, National Shelter, Public Interest Advocacy Sector, the Queensland Council of Social Service, Renew, the South Australian Council of Social Service, the Tasmanian Council of Social Service, Total Environment Centre, the Victorian Council of Social Service and the Western Australian Council of Social Service. So if anyone in this room or at home were in any doubt that organisations right across the Australian community, from business, from government, not-for-profits, the social services sector, are in strong support of this agenda, that list should put any doubt out of your mind. 30 organisations in total that have come together to say enough is enough. It's not okay that we're the worst in the developed world on energy efficiency. It is not okay that our most vulnerable are living in cold, leaky, unaffordable houses that are making them sick. And it's not okay that in 2022 that we're leaving the productivity benefits of smart energy management on the table. So we need to change that, and today is about charting a pathway forward. We can take our inspiration from overseas, and we're going to have a couple of keynote presentations shortly that will talk about the best of what's happening in Europe and North America, and I'm looking forward to those. We're also going to hear from the Assistant Minister about some of her thoughts about what she sees as the pathway forward. Then we're going to do a series of deep dives, because the reality is that this is a complex space and energy efficiency plays out in different ways in different parts of the economy. So I'm pleased to say that we've got experts on homes and commercial buildings and industrial policy chairing a series of panels. We'll be looking at homes at 2:25 with Kelly Court, commercial buildings at 3:05 with Frankie Muscovich, and we'll be doing a deep dive on industry at 4:05 with Holly Taylor. They will be the chairs for those sessions, each one of them an expert, but joined by a panel of experts to unpack the opportunities and challenges and how we overcome them to move this conversation forward. Then at 4:45, we'll turn the cameras back on you. I'm giving you fair warning. We'll be looking for your key insights, your takeouts of you, the people in this room that have joined us today, and what you're going to take forward out of today's summit. So, we want you to be part of the conversation as we move our way through on Twitter, on LinkedIn. We've obviously got the hashtag EESummit22. We're running questions through Slido, so you can log in at slido.com and then type in the same code, EESummit2022, and you'll be able to put a question, and the chairs will be able to see those, and we'll weave those into the conversations as we move our way through. So let's get started. We are here with the support of obviously Mirvac, who's hosting us in this amazing space, but also Siemens. And I'm delighted that my friend, the newly minted Chair and Chief Executive of Siemens Australia, Peter Halliday, is with us. I've known Peter for a decade probably at this point. Peter's been bouncing around the world, Asia and most recently in Europe, and has recently come back to Australia to lead the organisation. The Siemens that has been making a contribution to Australian society now for 150 years this year. And I'm particularly excited that Siemens is here to open the conference, because Europe, the situation in Europe is driving so much of the conversation around energy right around the world. Europe, a long-standing champion of energy efficiency, doing a lot of things really well, and there's a lot to learn from there. But obviously the situation in Ukraine and our friends in Germany and right across Europe, the UK, incredible challenges that they're facing in terms of energy bills. Many of those nations are redoubling their efforts when it comes to energy efficiency, because they see that as a key way to get off Russian gas and indeed to manage the energy price impacts that they're facing. So please put your hands together and welcome Peter Halliday.
Thanks, Luke. So I don't think there's been a more important time for such an event. And the fact that this event includes the Energy Efficiency Council, the Property Council, the AI Group, is a very promising sign to me that we are taking this role of energy efficiency seriously. With the recent government announcements and having Assistant Manager for Climate Change and Energy, Jenny McAllister here, and the California Energy Commissioner, Andrew McAllister, at this event also demonstrates the importance of this discussion today. So what's the chance of having two McAllisters here, driving climate change from energy efficiency, one from Australia and one from the US in California? Are they from the same clan? Even Luke he hinted on LinkedIn that maybe they're cousins. But I did Google the McAllisters, and the clan motto, it came up with a Latin word called fortiter, which means strongly, powerfully, bravely, and boldly. And so I think it's appropriate that we take on today's discussions in such a manner. And as Siemens celebrates its 150th year anniversary here in Australia, and coinciding with Germany, it's 175 years, I think it's fair to say that I'm excited to take on the new role as the CEO of Siemens Australia here, when we have so much technology that we can solve our challenges with. When I consider the vast challenge of achieving net zero, I'm reminded of one of the opening lines in a poem called Opportunity by an American poet called Burton Braley. The best race has not been run. I would say that the most important race to solve climate change is just at the beginning, but I see incredible opportunity ahead. I am optimistic. As governments and companies around the world commit to net zero, much of the public discussion has been on the transition from fossil fuels to renewables, or what we call the supply side. Sounds easy, doesn't it? You turn one off, turn one on, job's done, and accelerate the energy transition to meet net zero targets. But do we have to take a holistic approach, which includes the supply side and the demand side? And that's what this summit's all about today. Whilst in Europe is facing a winter of energy shortages, it's doubling down on energy efficiency. The EU's plan to get through the winter and the years ahead are actions that will accelerate the transitions to net zero through increasing renewable energy and increasing energy efficiency. You have to remember 10 years ago that wind and PV were heavily subsidised, and now they are cheaper than fossil fuels. So we need to be strong and brave when we support technologies like green hydrogen, which has some way to go to become commercialised. It's fair to say, however, that to date, leaders around the world find the demand side topic hard to sell in a soundbite. I'm fortunate enough to work for a technology company that works across both the supply side and the demand side. So you could even say we're carbon agnostic, or even carbon neutral, as I see the opportunities on both sides. Which leads me to continuing on the theme of Burton Braley's poem, Opportunity. I see three interconnected opportunities critical to addressing demand side and climate change. First, we've got to look at our own businesses and our own supply chain. Second is the need to rapidly digitalise our industries and infrastructure to achieve net zero. And thirdly, the role of smart government policies and international collaboration is key. So let's talk about the first one, starting with your own business and your supply chain. Sustainability is a broad topic, and you need to have a clear picture to reach net zero, to make your business fit for purpose for now and in the future. You will require a roadmap to manage your supply and demand side direct emissions, and your businesses will require to look at their supply chains. Take, for example, the supermarkets, where they are fastly tracking their net zero targets. There is no doubt that this will translate into the food and beverage areas, where they will insist and mandate that the food and beverage businesses are carbon neutral for to enable them to sell their products in those supermarkets. So there's a big step ahead for the SMEs in the food and beverage industries. Companies need to be proactive. I'm remembered when Siemens was the first industrial to set a carbon neutral target by 2030, sorry. We have a comprehensive ESG program in place called Degree, and I'm pleased to say we're ahead of where we were the schedule. I see positive results and savings that are supporting our bottom line. And this takes me to the next point, the rapid need for digitalisation of our industries and infrastructure if we are to achieve net zero. Digitalisation allows you to do more with less. It allows you to understand where the opportunities are for reducing energy consumption and therefore reducing emissions. It makes our industries and jobs more valuable, improving not only competitiveness, resilience, growth, but also delivering wider economic outcomes. It also drives innovation and commercialisation of things that help solve climate change faster and increase your company's or our country's competitiveness advantage by creating new industries. Take, for example, a digital twin using advanced software. With a digital twin, you can build and test everything digitally to optimise the performance and the quality and remove waste. Benefits can include rapid innovation cycles and therefore faster time to market, reduce production floor space and optimise production footprint, improve quality outcomes, less raw materials and less waste. We have a British customer called TrackWrap that uses digital twins to develop machines that consume 90% less energy and 70% less plastic when making film packaging for bottles. Digitalisation accelerates innovation, in turn creates new, better ways to reduce emissions rapidly. Don't underestimate these innovations and their impact on Australia. Some of these opportunities are game changers for emissions and life rafts for heavier emitting industries. Take example of a company called CH4 Global, whose aim is to create zero methane agriculture. This morning I signed an MOU with Siemens and CH4 Global to digitalise and automate and accelerate and scale up their planned state-of-the-art seaweed growing facility in South Australia. CH4 Global is seeking to transform the livestock industry by developing a unique aquaculture product at scale which is used in livestock to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. CH4 says their product can reduce methane from livestock by 90%. So my third point, good government policy has incredible potential to accelerate the outcomes for energy efficiency and CO2 reductions. The upgrade, for instance, for RMIT and Museums Victoria, which Siemens were part of, have driven massive energy savings that are paying for the projects over return of investment. These projects came about through a Victorian greener building program. It was just good policy. It was smart and stimulated not just work for Siemens, but many other contractors out there. If I look at Europe, where I spent the last years, there are many policies supporting a drive to less industrial CO2. The European Union has set long, ambitious targets to reduce energy usage. The EU set and achieved a target of reducing energy consumption by 20% by 2020 and increase that to 32.5% by 2030. International collaboration like what we have today can also drive better outcomes for energy efficiencies. Earlier this week in Sydney, I was privileged to welcome the new German ambassador to Australia. And we talked about the fact that energy efficiency is one of the strategic initiatives between the two nations. I know that Luke Menzel has been part of the work with the German government, which has found that Germany and Australia has complementary strengths on building policies and performance. This year, the German government funded a delegation of Australian delegates of energy efficient experts, which has already resulted in the German language introduction of the Neighbours rating system, which was launched in Berlin in June. So, the good news today is we have people in the room that are committed to go beyond the soundbite and the rally cry. The actual start to address the issues boldly by focusing on energy efficiency, the demand side. Most of this technology is already available today. I opened today by referring to Burton Bailey's poem, Opportunity, and I'll close with the last 3 lines of his inspiring work. The chances have just begun, for the best jobs haven't been started. The best work hasn't been done. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Peter, and what a segue. I'm delighted that you finished on policy because that's where we're going. I might just make a very quick comment on policy because back at the 2016 National Conference in Sydney, we had the Head of Energy Efficiency at the International Energy Agency with us, Dr. Brian Motherway, a man who's still in that job and doing a great job. And he had one clear message for the delegates at that conference, and that was policy is key. And the IEA looks across the world and they look at the countries that are doing well on energy efficiency, the countries that are falling behind, and it's the ambition of policy, and it's that focus year in, year out, working through the challenges and opportunities in different sectors that make all the difference. And so you're right, Peter, it's all about policy, which brings us to our next speaker. I'm delighted to welcome Senator Jenny McAllister, Assistant Minister for Climate Change and Energy. He's been a senator since 2015, but has been in this role as Assistant Minister for 4 months now, something like that. And one of the things that the Assistant Minister has been charged with is driving the energy efficiency agenda for the Albanese government. Perhaps less well known is that this is something of a homecoming because the Assistant Minister worked in energy efficiency policy and performance for the New South Wales government over a decade ago. So welcome home, Senator. We're delighted to have you with us. Please put your hands together for Jenny McAllister.
Make the microphones a little more height appropriate. Thanks very much, Luke, and thank you, Chris, also for your welcome. Where's Chris gone? Up the back. Thank you for your welcome, and thank you, Peter, also for those remarks. May I also acknowledge the traditional owners. We, of course, are meeting on Gadigal land. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. This is a great initiative, Luke. I'm really excited to be here. It is also a bit of a homecoming. One of the very nice things about taking on the portfolio is that many of the people who work in this area have worked in this area for a long time. It's really lovely to be reunited with many friends, and it means that I'm often in a position where I'm meeting with people that I know and whose advice I can trust. And I can certainly say that in the short number of months since becoming the Assistant Minister, I have taken liberal advantage of the deep expertise that exists in this sector, and I'm very grateful. Commissioner McAllister, can I offer you a very warm welcome? Somewhere in Scotland, there is a clan that is missing not one, but 2 of its energy policy enthusiasts, and it's a real privilege to have you here with us. And I did want to say that I know this room gathers together people who bring very different perspectives. It's actually a real achievement of the summit to have pulled together such a wide range of sponsors and participants. The spirit of collaboration I have observed since taking on this role is really terrific. And it is an amazing foundation for us to do some very good things together, because you are already all working together in a really impressive way. So my speech today is to talk a little bit about where I think we can go together. The key message I want to leave you with is this. For the first time in a long time, there is an Australian government that is prepared to lead on energy efficiency, and that's the conversation I want to have today. So about 118 years ago, very wet and stormy day, wet afternoon, a bit like this one, the Lady Mayoress of Sydney switched on the electricity supply to the city. And it was just a few kilometres over that way, I think. I'm not quite sure of my orientation, but it was on the site that is now occupied by the Star Casino. We were, I will concede to Commissioner McAllister, some decades behind the Californians, and as a New South Wales Senator, I can also concede that regrettably we were also behind the Victorians. Nonetheless, the effect was, of course, electrifying, and a contemporary described it like this. Without warning, a brilliant light struck the heart of the city. It seemed as though a flash of lightning had seared its way across the night. But unlike lightning, it remained radiant and steady. People ignored the wind and the rain and stopped to stare wide-eyed at the new street lamps. Stranger spoke to stranger of the phenomenon. Now, of course, over the 20th century, electricity offered much more than novelty. The electrification of our industries transformed our industrial potential. Electric trams and trains changed our patterns of settlement. Electricity in Australian homes transformed the way Australian families lived. And governments saw the importance of the technology, and they understood how essential it was and is for our economic and social progress. So as we stand on the threshold of an incredible revolution in energy technology, that is a responsibility that the Albanese government also recognises. We all come to this room with a different perspective, but I want to explain the Labor perspective. We see this conversation through the prism of our values. Affordable energy is the foundation for our economy to provide jobs, good conditions in Australian manufacturing and beyond. We also know that high energy costs can contribute to inequality, and the burden is often borne by those who can least afford it. Nobody likes paying energy bills, but for some people in our community, paying the bill means going without. The Brotherhood of St Lawrence reports that 1 in 5 Australian households are facing energy stress. Unlocking savings from efficiency requires spare funds that some in our community just do not have. And for rental households whose energy costs are 8% higher than homeowners in similar dwellings, they simply can't legally make the upgrades. We went to this election promising no one held back and no one left behind. And that is just as relevant to our energy system as it is to any other area of public policy. Now, this is all before we get to the impact on the climate. Each summer seems to be the hottest on record, notwithstanding the weather today, but for those born today, these may be some of the coolest summers of their lifetimes. And the reality is that many older homes were not up to scratch to meet the needs of the last 50 years, let alone the needs of the next 50. The community rightly expects that the energy system will be reliable, affordable, and limit the impact of climate change. And that is a shared interest across every individual and every organisation in this country. Australia is undergoing the most fundamental transformation of that energy system since it was first built. We want to lead. We want to return Australia to leadership in this domain. Legislating our emissions reduction target was a very early priority, and I was immensely proud to see so many diverse organisations come together the day that the Prime Minister and Minister Bowen wrote to the UNFCCC to advise our target of 43% reductions by 2030. And some of you are in the room today. There will be no single solution to meet that commitment on the path to net zero. It will mean using more fuel-efficient cars, reducing our industrial emissions and bringing renewables online. It will mean building the storage and the poles and the wires to get the new clean energy from where it's produced to where it needs to be. This government has a plan on all those fronts, led by Minister Bowen. The challenge Minister Bowen has asked me to take up is the demand side of the energy market. Through no fault of their own, Australian homes and businesses are wasting too much on energy. Preventing this waste is a double win. It is a win for the consumer, who pays less directly. It is a win across the system because the reduction in demand can lower cost for all consumers. And energy efficient homes in particular aren't just cheaper, they are more comfortable and they are healthier. A study on the Victorian Healthy Homes program found a relatively minor upgrade, reduced energy use and improved the health outcomes. And that resulted in savings of $887 per person in the healthcare system over the winter period. Of course, every watt we waste contributes to the climate emergency. According to the International Energy Agency, energy efficiency represents more than 40% of the emissions reductions, the abatement that is needed by 2040. And the challenges on the demand side are naturally intertwined with those on the supply side, as Peter pointed out. We face a very significant burden of construction, both as a consequence of the ageing plant and the policy failures of the last government that saw 4 gigawatts leave the system, but only 1 gigawatt of investment to replace it. And in the coming decade, every kilowatt hour that we can save will make the transformation easier and lighten the burden on households and businesses. For every business, organisation and household, there are ongoing and significant benefits if we can do this. There are opportunities there waiting for us to grasp them. We can build better homes. We can upgrade the existing stock. We can bring greater transparency to performance. We can use more energy efficient appliances in our homes and our businesses and better equipment in our industries. We can find smart ways to manage demand, to not just use less electricity, but to use it when it is cheapest and when it is cleanest. But we do need the right policy framework to make this a reality. Doing so will require supply chains and skills to see that transformation through. I think the good news is that we're not starting from scratch. Neighbours, which was established by the Carr Labor government in New South Wales, works well to bring transparency to commercial buildings. The E3 program, which was established by Labor in 1992 and expanded in the GEMS Act introduced by the Gillard government, has made enormous gains in appliances. States and territories have done much of the heavy lifting, setting on their own course to tackle some of these challenges, and businesses have stepped up. Many of you have set your own targets and are making your own reductions in emissions. Australians have stepped up too, installing vast amounts of rooftop solar and making investments in their own homes. But it's the federal leadership on the demand side and more generally that's been missing. And as with the broader energy policy settings, the previous government's inaction and inability to agree on any policy framework has left it to others. The National Energy Productivity Plan had some decent ideas, but the target set the bar way too low. It was then mostly ignored by the Commonwealth. We have languished for a decade as the international community has left us in the dust. Yes, we are exposed to the international market, and Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine has had profound effects. But more than a decade of coalition inaction sees us fall behind, and consumers are paying more because of that absence of leadership. And that needs to change, and it will change. I'm pleased to make this commitment that the Albanese government will lead. In mid-2023, the Albanese government will deliver a plan for better energy performance. Our aim is to drive down energy bills and emissions, preventing energy waste and taking the pressure off households, businesses, the energy system and our climate. It will be a strategy that sets a long-term framework to bring focus to this incredibly important area of policy. Over the coming months, we will start a process to engage with all of you who are prepared to take up the opportunity and make a contribution. Those with technical and policy expertise, state and territory energy ministers and representatives from every level of government, businesses across every sector and their peak bodies, workers and their elected representatives, advocates across civil society, innovators, philanthropists, ordinary Australians. We're serious about doing it in a consultative way. I hope that you will have seen that at the Jobs and Skills Summit. But together we can set clear goals. We can begin to put in place measures that kickstart a rapid transformation in performance. We can put in place a framework that ensures we can adapt over the longer term. This government is determined to put downward pressure on the cost of living. Australians deserve not to worry about choosing which essential to go without. Australians deserve good jobs. Australians deserve healthy, comfortable homes and workplaces. And Australians deserve a stable climate. You are all part of that. I am extremely grateful to be here with you today. I'm looking forward to all of the presentations that are scheduled over the course of the afternoon. And I'll just say this, we are at the beginning. But I thank you for the seriousness, the professionalism, and the collaborative spirit that you've all brought to this challenge. Thank you.
Assistant Minister, thank you. And can I be the first to congratulate you on what I think is a really important milestone. So this is opening a new chapter, the announcement of a new energy performance framework, a timeline for consultation. I think it's incredibly appropriate that we take a step back and reflect on the things that are working well. You mentioned neighbours, you mentioned GEMS, and the opportunities to build on those foundations. And then the areas where we have to, build the market because there has been a period of inaction and we are really starting from scratch. And so it's a big task, and we're looking forward to collaborating with you to get it done. And we can draw inspiration from some of our friends overseas. So it's my great pleasure now to welcome my friend, Commissioner Andrew McAllister, who has just been appointed to his third term. He informs me likely his final term as the California Energy Commissioner. He's got another 5 years, but that'll be 15 years, I think, Andrew, in the job. And there's a lot to do in those 5 years. We are in the critical decade, both in California and here in Australia. Andrew is a global champion for the role of energy efficiency and energy management in the transition that we're working our way through around the world. And I want to thank you for parking your teenage daughter with your sister-in-law and flying to the other side of the world to help us kickstart this new phase of the conversation around the demand side. We draw inspiration from California, but we've learnt over the course of meetings with energy market bodies and governments and not-for-profits and businesses over the last several days that there's things that we have to share as well. And so it is a genuine opportunity for collaboration between our two jurisdictions. So you don't want to hear from me, you probably want to hear from the Commissioner. So I'll get you to put your hands together and welcome Commissioner Andrew McAllister.
Well, thank you very much, Luke. It's a real honour to be here. You're never a prophet in your own land, so it's really nice to have a little change of pace. But we've had a number of days, several days of really great meetings, and I feel like I'm kind of getting into the zeitgeist and sort of figuring out how to really sort of coordinate our various actions and really learn from one another. Nobody has all the keys to the kingdom on climate change. I mean, we really have to learn from each other. This is a global problem, and we have to have a global collaboration. And I think necessity is everywhere. So I'm looking forward to an ongoing collaboration. I know our Governor Newsom is on the same page with the new administration, and we're going to look for ways to even formalize some collaboration. So I'm excited about that. So thanks a lot, Luke. It's just great to be back after 5 years or so. And Peter, you loved your comments, and Chris, thanks for the warm welcome. And just all the partners and sponsors. A really momentous day. It's a true honor, really, to follow to the podium, the Assistant Minister, and evidently my long-lost cousin. And luckily, my parents decided to call me by my middle name because my first name is actually Joseph. So, and I'm regretting not bringing my tartan tie, to wear, but we gotta keep it in the family. So really just everyone is so warm and kind, and I just think the spirit of collaboration and just newness is just palpable, and it's a huge opportunity, which is we have a great opportunity, but we also have an incredible amount of necessity and urgency. I mean, we have global weirding, often we call it global warming, but really just our climate systems are just out of whack, and we've got to get them back, in some semblance of normalcy. So I do have some PowerPoints. Hopefully this will not be death by PowerPoint here. But I wanted to just sort of inject some of our experience in California as we start to talk about in detail some of these issues. So that's Yosemite Valley, for any of you who have been to California and seen that beautiful place. Every season it seems like we have wildfires, bushfires that envelop our state. And a couple of years ago, the valley was like a bathtub, and it was just thick with smoke. You couldn't see 100 feet. And it was just heartbreaking, the forest that went away. And that's, part of the patrimony that we're defending here as well. That is a picture from the fire season in 2020 of the Golden Gate Bridge, obviously, and that was at roughly noon during just an incredible firestorm. And so that's what we're dealing with pretty much every summer now. The long-term drought and just we're living high temperatures, as Citizen Minister said, the climate is every year is the hottest year. And so just the statistics are not, they tell the story. So this is the slide with the most words on it, mostly pictures. But I just wanted to sort of lay out our big goals. We have a goal for 100% retail sales of electricity to be carbon-free by 2045. That obviously has to be done reliably and affordably. We have to do all three. We have to decarbonize, we have to maintain reliability, and we have to improve affordability. So downward pressure on rates that Luke mentioned is also paramount. We have a goal to double efficiency savings by 2030. So we're in the middle of that, and it's a little bit of a squishy sort of goal. So I'll try to describe that and what kind of progress and how we're making that progress. And then just recently, Governor Newsom set us a goal of achieving 3 million, either the term of art is climate ready and climate friendly, but sort of for our purposes here today, I'll say electric ready and all electric buildings, with those goals, 3 million and 7 million by 2030 and 2035. So those are big numbers. We have about 12 million households in California. And we have just by the by, really, zero emission vehicles goals as well, which are, I'll mostly talk about buildings, but that is also a major component of load growth that we'll see in the electric system in the coming couple decades. 100% of our light duty vehicles, passenger vehicles, will be ZEVs by 2035. We will not be able to buy a new internal combustion engine in 2035 or after 2035 in California, light duty. And then another decade beyond that, there's a sort of a little bit more aspirational goal for the medium and heavy duty sectors, but we're engaging with that as well. And then Governor Brown, the previous governor, adopted an executive order to go carbon neutral of our whole economy by 2045. So these are our goals, and they're in statute or effectively so, and we're pursuing them with vigor. So it's clear, I think most people in this room probably agree with this statement, but electricity is really the platform that we're going to decarbonize with. I think, it just is, we are very confident that we will get to a carbon neutral grid well before 2045. That last 10 or 15%, it gets a little bit challenging, but I think innovation is going to solve these problems, and cost of storage and all the other technologies are coming down. But you see, this is from this most recent scoping plan from the California Air Resources Board, which is our air quality agency. But it agrees with the Energy Commission's analysis as well, that we just have a lot of resources to bring online between now and 2045. The electric sector is going to double or even triple in size in terms of just the volume of energy that's going to be flowing through it. And the capacity additions in a variety of technologies, diverse technologies, are pretty mind-boggling. We have to sort of beat our record to date every year going forward for the next couple decades in terms of capacity installations. And you can sort of see all the different technologies there. So this doubling goal, this is the one slide I have about this, but that is a best case scenario for doing everything we possibly can, and that sort of diagonal black line is the goal for doubling efficiency savings. I won't go into the definitions because it gets a little wonky. But we need to aggressively electrify and take our existing combustion end uses and substitute those with electrification as well. So we really need to and this is throughout residential, commercial, industrial, agriculture, wherever we can electrify. That's where we really get the benefit of the decarbonized electric grid, and that's how we sort of get the trifecta of efficiency, electric, and decarbonized. So that is not a given at all. I mean, we have a lot to do to sort of create both of those wedges going forward, and you can see where we are right now, 2022. We may not even be quite there. I mean, we're trying to move the needle and turn the ship. So this is just, you can check our website. This is just a screen capture from our website, but I wanted to just tell you all the things that we do. And the Energy Commission was formed in the 1970s. Actually, Ronald Reagan, sort of against type maybe, signed the legislation that enabled the Energy Commission to exist. And that was entirely really due in reaction to the price spikes, the Saudi embargoes in the mid-70s. There was this, he wasn't going to sign the bill, but it was a very visionary bill. It was sitting in the gathering dust, and he's like, where's that bill? We gotta do something. I need an energy policy. So he signed it. But by that time, it was late in his term, and the next governor fell to the next governor to implement the Energy Commission, and that was Jerry Brown. Jerry Brown 1, the early version, the Linda Ronstadt version. And he appointed the first commissioners and stood up the agency and started us on our way. And then came back, several decades later and really, I would say, reinvigorated the energy policy landscape in California, and just a real visionary and sui generis. So we do power plant licensing. We're not doing a lot of that these days in terms of the old thermal plants, but we are doing a lot of storage and large solar and moving into transmission to sort of help that process along as well. So we do a lot of work on licensing infrastructure. The demand forecast is something I just want to, it's a very intense activity, very data intensive. We've got 100 people in the division that does the forecast. But I just wanted to highlight that we get into the weeds on electricity, of course, on natural gas, all of the pieces that go into that demand forecast, including projecting rooftop solar, projecting EV adoption, projecting fuel substitution, projecting we do liquid fuels as well, not quite part of electricity and natural gas. We project energy efficiency and all the different distributed energy resources. And so we wrap that all up into a demand forecast. And then that goes over to our sister agencies, the Public Utilities Commission that regulates the utilities, the retailers, and the poles and wires, they're one, and the system operator, the CAISO, the independent system operator, that does the transmission planning. So what you end up with is everything from everything that influences demand down to the appliance level going into the forecast and being reflected in the planning, in the procurement that the utilities do for power and the planning that the system operator does for transmission in the wholesale market. And so you really do have clear responsibilities for every piece of the energy ecosystem. And so I think that actually helps keep us on the same page and helps keep the urgency clear. The third major area of we are a regulatory body, we're a standards making body. And so the three main standards that we do are building energy efficiency standards, that's Title 24, appliance efficiency, Title 20, and then load management standards, which is a lesser known standard, but we're actually, the day after I get back from this trip, we're gonna, hopefully, my colleagues and I are gonna adopt the new load management standards that are gonna really, I think, be transformational. So I'll talk a little bit about those. And then we do some other things, emergency planning, project grants and loans. We push out hundreds of millions of dollars a year in R&D and finance and quite a few grants. So that number is steadily going up as the legislature kind of empowers us to do more of that. So buildings, I'll sort of accelerate here. About half, so the source energy in our buildings, it's about half natural gas and about half electricity. And over time, what's going to happen is those blue wedges are going to grow. The whole pie is going to stay about the same size. Those blue wedges are going to grow, and the red ones are going to get smaller. And the blue ones are going to correspond to electricity that's increasingly decarbonized. And that's how we get to our 2045 goals. So I wanted to talk about existing buildings. New construction actually is the easy part. So we have very aggressive new construction building standards, but we have to get into our existing buildings and improve those. And the Assistant Minister talked about that. There's a broad set of social issues that housing embodies and entails way beyond energy. And I think part of the sales job we need to do is to make sure that we're improving the quality of the housing, the indoor air quality, cost of maintenance, just the overall housing experience and by the way, we'll get the benefit of a positive climate impact. But if we're going to meet our 2045 decarbonization goals in the building sector, aggressive, efficient electrification is the only way we're going to get there. So that became clear in this analysis that the legislature asked us to do. So the source is there. 6 million heat pump goal by 2030. Again, we're talking many, many millions of electric devices. Heat pumps, I just wanted to highlight because we are in the middle, sort of beginning phases of a real market transformation toward heat pumps. And we have extensive natural gas distribution throughout the state, and so we're sort of working, we're a little bit working against that inertia. But they really are a get-out-of-jail-free card a little bit to some extent. They're inherently way more efficient than gas combustion, and they're cleaner, and they help us decarbonize. And so we get both the decarbonization benefit and the efficiency benefit. So heat pumps are kind of what's going to help us meet that doubling of efficiency goal as well. And then the last major topic I want to talk about is flexibility. So the modern version of energy efficiency is digital, as Peter talked about. And basically the demand that we're building, it's going to drive investment into the distribution grid and all the way up to the wholesale, the bulk power system. But the demand itself is going to be able to have a nice handshake with the supply in real time. And so all of these new loads are going to be communicating, paying attention to the grid needs, paying attention to the carbon content, the cost, whatever rate the end user's on, and they're going to be able to modulate themselves to match the grid conditions. And so that's going to optimize our overall investment portfolio from the demand side on up through the supply side and everything in between. And so I've just listed a few parallel regulatory initiatives that we're doing at the Commission and at the Public Utilities Commission, our sister agency, to really move the several parallel trains down the track that are really going to enable this flexible ecosystem. And so that's sort of, I guess, I'm really excited about the load management standards that we're going to pass next week, hopefully. And basically, it's a web-based tool that has all the time-dependent rates, and those rates will permeate sort of down to the device level, so up sort of prices to devices, or a congestion signal or a carbon content signal, and that'll go right to the device level, which will be automatically changing its profile, its consumption profile. Certainly storage and thermal storage and many devices have that ability to flex. And so it's kind of behind the scenes automatically. If we'd had this system in place, a few weeks ago when we had a heat wave and we really had grid stress, we would have had a couple of gigawatts of capacity and just made it a non-issue. So this is the ecosystem that we're building, and we're fully in the digital age. So this is doable. It may look like rocket science, but we have a lot of rocket scientists. And so here are the key takeaways I just want to leave you with. The demand-side solutions have to be a core part of our decarbonization journey. I think we all agree on that. The clean energy transition is not going to be as easy, and the end point will not be as, I think, efficient for us as a society if we don't really double down on the demand side. And that's energy efficiency, flexibility, and electrification. So that second bullet, I think, as we've had meetings, as Luke has sort of taken me around, we've talked to a lot of different folks. I've kind of grown to appreciate a little bit that our agency, it goes back to the Warren-Alquist Act, which gave rise to the commission. Our agency landscape has really clear obligations for each agency. We have processes that are in place, and the linkages between those processes within agencies and across agencies are very clear. And so the forecast, kind of becomes this connective tissue across long-term planning, across the energy landscape. And so we sort of sometimes end up mediating between the Public Utilities Commission on the one hand, the utilities, and the system operator on the other hand, because they do have slightly different, somewhat different sort of incentives in terms of investment and sort of how they perceive reliability. But it works. The agencies get along, and we're sort of rowing in the same direction under a common vision. Automation is key as well. It's going to help us optimize this whole journey and minimize cost and create downward pressure on rates. And then existing buildings. The last point there, we do not have existing buildings figured out. They need a lot of investment, and we have to find ways to subsidize the people that need it. But then as we move up market, get costs down and sort of really get get the market moving. But as we move up market, find ways to link to private capital and really make that work. We don't have perfect models for that. And the amount of money we're talking about is just way more than any government's going to be able to subsidize. So we have to make it work for consumers, and we have to make it viable for the private sector to get in there. So those are my comments for now. I'm looking forward to the discussion, and really appreciate all the attention. And really, thanks again, Luke, for all you're doing to organize.